Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, HEforSHE Global Advocate. Martin Brooker, Commodore, Australian Navy. Andres Ingi Johnson, Member of Parliament of Iceland. Dato Turashvili, writer feminist from Georgia. And a little bit later, Taras Topola, rock and pop singer, the frontman of Antitila band, is going to join us. Marching, please, now you take the floor. Good morning, everybody. Glory to Ukraine. I would like to welcome at the discussion platform for the fifth discussion platform, HEforSHE, Men That Support Women. My name is Marcin Walewski. I am the head of the democratization of department at OSCE, and I am very pleased to be the moderator of this discussion. And I would like to say that a principle at our OSCE office, we don't take part in main panels. We don't participate in the all-male events, but as this is a female congress and the topic is noble, I think we can make an exception. Do you agree? Okay, so that's very nice. OSCE office is proud to support Ukrainian and Polish Women Congress for many years, and I respect this Congress very much, and I would like sincerely to express my gratitude to the organizers of it. And I personally very actively work at the promoting of women policy participation for mostly than 2 decades. Unfortunately, for all of these years, I've been the witness to resilience from a lot of men. And of course, the way to gender equality in a social life is going to be long. Our research shows that in the best way, it will take at least 50 years in Europe. And now, let me use my English.
For quality, I will switch to English language. I think we all define here ourselves at this panel as a strong allies of the women movement. But what I would like to propose is that we just not just discuss why we men should be involved. We know that supporting women's movement is a right and smart thing to do, but I would like to focus in our discussions on what is exactly that we men have been doing and can as allies of women movements. Gentlemen, all of you here, we are all here, what I would call influencers, and I would like to hear how we can combat gender stereotypes, sexism, violence against women, and convince more men to support women's movement. We have excellent experts on this panel. I will briefly introduce each of them, but let me start with our first speaker. I would like to give a floor to Deputy Minister, Mr. Kyslytsya. And let me just make a personal remark. I had a pleasure to see Deputy Minister at a number of different international forums, and believe me, he's one of the best European diplomats. And Ukraine can be very proud of the work which you are doing. As a Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, you are also HEforSHE Global Advocate. And I know that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has become the first state institution to join the HEforSHE Solidarity movement in Ukraine, and is committed to a full-fledged gender audit in 2019 to promote its organizational learning and take concrete actions at the individual and organization level to comprehensive mainstream gender. So, Minister, could you please share with us how have you been advocating for advancing women's rights and what makes you a women's rights ally? The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm quite embarrassed for that kind of introduction, but anyway, my path to gender issues was personal. After living for a number of years in the United States, we came with my son to Ukraine in 2006. And he was enrolled in a math school. So I went to a meeting with teachers, a parent-teachers meeting. And you imagine the environment of the math school. And what I heard was from one mother, not father, although fathers were present. A mother was complaining, but not about the right of her daughters, but about that she got a bad grade, the mother got a bad grade in the class of householding. She said, I was embroidering all night, and I got a bad grade. And she was not complaining for the fact that while her daughter was in the household class, the boys were in the logic class. So the girls were sent in that school to the household, and the boys were sent to a logic class. So my question was, are boys in the logic class to be more logical later in the life, explaining why the girls have to cook for them? In 2006, I went as a director for international organizations to Strasbourg. And for long 10 years, I became a part of the Gender Equality Committee, which was initially called Steering Committee on Gender Equality, and then later on it became the Gender Equality Commission. In fact, I was the second president of that Gender Equality Commission in the whole history. There was an Icelandic guy many, many years before me. Then I was elected, which was extraordinary given the fact that majority, if not 90% of the members were women. And I would like to let you know that yesterday, another man was elected in Strasbourg as the head of the Gender Equality Commission, and it's a guy from the UK, a very good friend of mine. Why I'm telling you that? Because in Ukraine as a nation, and even in this Congress, we witness many, many emotional stories, personal experiences, including myself. I mean, I just shared with you my personal experience. But what I'm trying to say, on many occasions, human rights and women's rights are in fact part of the human rights. We should not really separate the human rights agenda from women's rights agenda, although there are nations who are very much persistent separating human rights and women's rights. If I may, it's a very high-tech issue. It's not emotions. Although emotions is a significant background and factor, but it is a high-tech business. Human rights and women's rights are based on standards. I've been in one of the parliamentary committees last year, and there was a very nice gentleman who, when asked, approached about the women's rights, he said, "We all love women." And I said, no, wait a second, it's not about loving women. It's about you being the member of the parliament, incorporating the legal standards of human rights and women's rights in your legislative work. And the same goes about being pro-European. There is hardly any mainstream politician in this country who says, I'm pro-European. But it's one thing to enjoy life in Paris being pro-European from Ukraine, and it's another thing being pro-European in the government and in the parliament, and being very persistent about how you fight for your bills that incorporate in the legal standards of this country the legal standards that do exist in Europe. Therefore, I refuse to accept what is called recently in Europe and in the world post-truth discussions. Discussions that are based on emotions, personal perceptions, and even personal experiences, no matter how emotional and touching they are. I insist on the discussions that are based on standards. And for European dimension, those standards are primarily the Council of Europe. With all my respect and admiration of the European Union so far has no competence in many human rights issues, including women's rights. It is the Council of Europe that has legal standards, and we have to do our best to implement these standards. Being a foreign policy officer for many years and traveling to Strasbourg for many years, I would like to use this opportunity to underline that hypocrisy is still there, including in Strasbourg. Let's see on what's going on with the institution for the last 70 years. 13 Secretary Generals, out of which just one woman. The point of reference for human rights and women's rights in Europe is the Council of Europe, and we still have the institution that matter-of-factly had just one woman as the Secretary General. Therefore, if you go on the MFA webpage or if you go on my Facebook page, you will find the position paper that the Foreign Ministry developed and distributed in Europe about the selection of the new Secretary General. The process that started in October and will continue to June when the Parliamentary Assembly will elect a new Secretary General. The Ukrainian position paper says, of course, we should not really physically match profiles, but it is a matter of fact that we had just one woman as the Secretary General of the Council of Europe in 70 years. In fact, it is also the matter of fact, and it's part of the position paper, that we have never had a Central European person or Eastern European person on top of the Council of Europe. The United Nations, never, ever, ever we had the Secretary General. Although I do recognize what the ambassador of Portugal said, the particular role of Guterres in terms of promoting women's rights. NATO, never. OECE, never. I'm not saying that we should physically really profile people. The best candidates should be elected, but it's a matter of fact. And to conclude at this point, I would like to say that indeed the Foreign Ministry, and I'm really full of admiration of my Minister Pavlo Klimkin, who agreed willingly after a number of conversations, but brief conversations with Anastasia and myself, the MFA decided, and we made a public pledge, that we would undergo the gender audit next year. And that audit will not be based on just figures or emotions or perceptions. This audit will be based, with the help of Anastasia, on the standards. And I hope that other institutions in this government and in this country will follow our example and will have the full gender audit. Thank you.
Щиро дякую, пані Сергію.
Thank
When we will have a discussion, we'll certainly go back to this leading by example, what you mentioned by international organizations. Now, it is my great pleasure to give the floor to our second speaker, Commodore Martin Broker, who is a veteran of the 37 years of service in the Royal Australian Navy. Commodore has an extensive career, including operation service as a deputy commander of Australia's joint forces in the Middle East and Afghanistan. His experience also includes leading teams implementing cultural change programs in defense, as he was the program director for Australian Navy's biggest change program, New Generation Navy. He's an advocate for gender diversity and inclusion and a strong supporter of the HEforSHE campaign. Commodore, the Australian Navy, clearly, is one of the male-dominated fields. Could you share with us how you got involved in advancing women's rights and why and what have you been what was your contribution so far, both professionally and outside of your work?
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. Second day of the Congress, and I am joyful to the fact that in the audience today are more men. I am joyful of the fact that there are daughters that fathers have brought, and I'm also joyful for the fact that mothers have brought sons to hear the conversation of the Congress. My personal, moment was when I understood that as a father of daughters that I had a role to play, and I kind of rated myself as somebody who promoted gender equality, but I didn't really understand the real issues that my own daughters would face in the workplace. And a good colleague of mine, somebody who some of you know, Commander Jenny Whitwer, who's done work here with UN Women, both here and also in New York. She shared with me a mentoring program that was designed for women in the Royal Australian Navy. And part of that program was some audio content that was for managers to understand what the mentoring program was about and what the focus of it was. And it was that content that made me understand that I had no idea really about the challenges that my own daughters would have. When I heard that content, I realized that I needed to do more, and I needed to understand how it was going to be for them, like walk in their shoes. Understanding, really important, and you need to, all men need to understand that. As I said yesterday, it's very much about becoming aware that this is an issue. My daughters, I know I'm proud of them, not for their looks, but for what they've achieved. They have all done second degrees at university. Some of them are working in male-dominated environments, and I have a role to play to help them with that, to advocate for them stepping up and be encouraging them to go forward. One is a geologist in coal mining, very male-dominated industry. Another has become a maths teacher to teach mathematics and to show that that is an important subject for women to be good at. And the last one is a forensic science and has an ambition to be a police officer. So I can be nothing but proud of the fact that they have chosen to follow a career like that. I guess in terms of what I've done professionally, it's always to be there to make sure that diversity, and I use the word diversity, is present in everything that I do, whether it be in governance organisations or in the workplace, and to give equal opportunities to all those who are there, whether it be old or young, or whether it be based upon gender. It's really pleasing to see governance committees that have representation from both genders on those committees. It's important that if I run a meeting that I ensure that those people are included and actually they're at the table, not in the back seats. I think the other contribution you can make is actually at in a community level. And so one of the things I've done is become involved in a community-based program. It's called Men's Link, based in Canberra, Australia. But that program is actually about dealing with the issues of masculine stereotypes, showing the fact that for boys it's okay to cry. The fact that being a man is not necessarily about being strong and being physical and being, having a focus around sport. The fact that it's also understanding what it's like to be a girl at the age of, and this program works with young men at the age of 12 in schools, with men standing up and saying, you know what, this is actually what it means to be a man. It's not about the strong man, it's not about the sports hero, the fact that there are breaking down the stereotypes, and we need to do that. I think the other thing that's occurred is opening up for participation and giving equal opportunities, and we've done that in the Australian Navy as well. It used to be, when I joined the Navy, it's a place where you could only do certain roles as a woman. In fact, there were very few when I started. Nowadays, every role is open to women. There are no exclusions, both in the Navy, Army and Air Force. And I think, you know, we as men need to continue to stand up for that and say, this is not about whether gender can do this particular job. This is about the right person. This is about having the capability we need to contribute to the national security of our country. And of course, it is the same here in the Ukraine, as we heard this morning. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm sure there are going to be plenty of opportunities to ask you concrete questions about what kind of programs you've seen as particularly effective. Let me now give a floor to Honourable Member of Parliament, Mr. Andres Jónsson, who is a Member of Parliament representing Left-Green movement in the Icelandic Parliament. You've been a Member of Parliament since 2016, re-elected in 2017. I know that you launched a very important discussion group for male parliamentarians, aiming and sensitizing them to gender-related issues. And let me just put it this way, no pressure, but we all know that Iceland was the first country to, where we actually got first democratically directly elected female president. Right now, leader of your own party is a prime minister. So quite a remarkable place, I would say. Someone could actually argue that your country can be called a heaven for women. So from the Icelandic perspective, looking at the indicators, looking at the historical record, would you argue that men politicians in Iceland are more supportive to women movements compared with other countries? If you could just share with us the perspective of someone who's been operating in a very women-friendly environment.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely no pressure there, I hear. Yes, Iceland is leading the world on all of these gender ranks. We've been on the top of those for like a decade or so, but we're not a heaven for women. There are so many things we need to fix. Even in the best country in the world for women, there's a lot we need to address. I'm very happy that you mentioned our first president, first female president, because she shows the value of role models. She was elected in 1980, and she was in office until 1996. So my generation, both female and male, grew up seeing this role model leading the country, and I think that really made a difference. So my generation comes into the political arena knowing that men and women can lead. But yeah, the role of politicians, male politicians, in the changes we've made so far has mostly been supportive. The real change has come from female grassroots movements. The suffragette movement was mentioned earlier today. The change we have achieved has been not gradual, but in leaps. So we had a women's movement in the 70s fighting for free abortion and equal pay. And of course, they needed allies within parliament because we only had one female member of parliament at that time. That was addressed with the next leap in the 1980s when women ran their own political platform, and that put women in parliament from 5% up to 15%. But still, it took until 2009 to reach 40% in parliament. Then in the 1990s, we probably hit the biggest milestone when we started having daycare for all children and we had parental leave. This again was pushed by the women's movement and supported by people in politics, male and female. And this is what really made the big societal change. This almost forces the household to share burdens. Both fathers and mothers need to raise their children when mothers enter the job market. And we have very high labor market participation for both men and women. It's over 80% for both. So we have no choice but to share the burdens or the pleasures of raising the family and keeping the household together. But even so, we have these. We have the culture of the women shouldering more of the responsibilities. So there's always more change to be made. Now, as I say, so some of the change is a bit slow. We only reached parity in parliament 40% in 2009, so that's like 100 years after women got the right to vote. And we went down below 40% in 2017. So the positive changes we've reached can easily be, we can have backslides to them. So we really need to keep our guard. Now we're at 38% in parliament, for 38% women. And what we also lost were other diversity issues within parliament. So with the women we lost in the last elections, we also lost the only immigrant members of parliament we had. And for a country with a 12% immigrant population, having 0 in parliament is very low. And we're also one of the oldest parliaments Iceland has had this century. But the discussion panel you mentioned, so that's how we can, as members of parliament, make the environment, the working environment of parliament, friendly and inclusive for all. And this is something we wanted to address following the last elections when we went down below the 40% threshold. And we wanted to start the discussion on how we can compensate for that by making the environment better. This actually coincided with the Me Too movement, putting forward a few hundred stories of women in politics that had been harassed or violated over the past years. So we, in the end, became an action platform for the change that was needed. So the Icelandic Parliament has had what we call a barber shop, where all of the members of Parliament sat down in small groups and just had very open discussions on how we can interact with each other with respect and how we can try to eliminate sexual harassment in Parliament as a workplace. Following that, we reviewed the Code of Ethics of Parliament, which is sadly something that is very important these days, because just a week ago, the media published secret recordings of 6 members of Parliament having very basically disgusting discussions on their colleagues and individuals in society, mainly sexist, but also against people with disabilities and gay people. And now we have had to use the Code of Ethics for the first time to launch an ethics investigation into these people. The worst part of that, or one of the worst parts of that, is that 2 of those members were ministers a few years back, and they were HEforSHE champions as well. So the ironic lesson of this is that when we step up as allies of the women's movement, we have to make sure that we're doing it honestly and with full commitment. We can't be HEforSHE champions and then 2 years later, when we're not ministers anymore, start calling women disgusting names while sat around that table at a bar. That's just something that we have to have 0 tolerance for. And luckily, what the past few days have shown us is that Iceland doesn't have tolerance for this anymore. So these members this has to be addressed as a serious issue, because Parliament isn't just a place where you make legislation, it's also a place where you work together and where you have to provide the female members a safe environment. They have to be able to work in committees where we're working very closely with each other without feeling threatened by other members of that committee. And hopefully we'll move towards that. But things are moving very quickly these days, and it's a very difficult development that we're going through. But hopefully we'll come out standing and with a properly he-for-she, gender equal, nice environment for women.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for bringing this example, because indeed, like you said, the picture is not that rosy, and the issue of code of conduct behavior in the parliament is unfortunately very relevant for this part of Europe and also for Ukraine, because over the years we've seen certainly non-parliamentary unethical behavior when it comes towards women members of parliament. So I think we can go back to lessons from Iceland. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Dato Turashvili, who is a well-published, well-known writer. You published 17 books, including best-selling novel, The Flight from the USSR, which has been translated to 14 languages. You've written a number of plays and scenarios. You are the most popular TV show host talking about books in Georgia. You have 3 daughters. But what I would like to, first of all, acknowledge is you are coming from a unique country. One of my favorites, the country which not only gave women voting rights 100 years ago, but was the first country to have a social democratic government in the world, with a number of women being elected. And as of last week, the country which elected in direct elections first woman president in post-Soviet region. So again, no pressure, but I would love to hear from you, from the Georgian, as an observer of Georgian society. Could you share with us your views on how to support women's rights from the perspective of writer, very important influencer?
Thank you very much. First of all, thanks for the invitation. I'm really very happy to be here because I've never seen together so many clever, beautiful, and successful women. I'm really very happy and glad. And as you mentioned, I'm a host of a TV show in Georgia. Every Saturday, I talk about new books or old books I like. I must to talk, but generally I talk about women and their rights and gender equality and so on, because it's very important for contemporary Georgia. But first, very shortly about the history. For example, the title of this platform is HEforSHE. It may be very strange, but in Georgian language, we don't have difference between men and women in pronouns. For example, in English, as in English, for example, he or she, or in Russian, for example, on, Anna, we don't have. We have the same word for women and men. It's very interesting. Maybe you know that we are very ancient nation, or if there are Spanish speakers here in this, they also know él or ella, we don't have. So this is just one word for men and women. And as you know, we are a very old nation and with very old culture and literature. And we have a novel written in 5th century, where the woman, there is a story about couple, Georgian husband and Armenian wife, by the way. And even in 5th century, to have a Georgian husband was not a very good idea, and the woman, the wife had many problems. But it's strange, and I'm very proud that in that novel, written in 5th century, the woman starts talking about women's rights. Of course, without any success or result in that time, but we are, of course, very proud. In 12th century, maybe you know, because there is he's also well known here, because in the Soviet times was translated, I don't know how to pronounce in Ukrainian, but that's Night in a Tiger's Skin, or by Shota Rustaveli. Maybe you know it here, because there is a very good translator from Georgian into Ukrainian here. So he wrote that novel. This is poetry novel, and he talks about the gender equality in 12th century. Of course, we are very proud, and of course we are very proud. For example, in 12th century, in his period, we had the woman ruler. She was a governor, she was a leader of the country, and that's the golden age for Georgia. Not Queen Tamar, but King Tamar. So it's also strange that she was a woman, but we use King Tamar, not Queen. In 19th century, because of this, because of literature which had really huge influence in Georgia, for new generations, they knew that that it's something very necessary. For example, in any Georgian museum in Georgia, you can find the same number or count the saddles for horses, for men and for women. Saddle, it's sidlo, how to say, so, yeah. Yeah, saddle. So it's very strange, but it's true, it happens in Georgia. But what happened later, in 19th century, in Georgia there was very strong feministic movement, but you know, so strong that in the beginning of 20th century, when Georgia was had a good chance to be independent country again from the Russian Empire, that time we had, as you mentioned about the social democrats, that time women had, of course, rights to vote and to be voted. And what Poroshenko mentioned yesterday, 12%. 12% of women we had that time, 100 years ago. You have to know, yeah. Yeah, it's true, he knows. But then, you know, what happened in 1921, Georgia was again attacked by Russian Empire. That time it was a Soviet Russian Empire. And the result was again annexion and occupation. In the beginning, it's very strange, you know what, in the beginning there were so many very strong female revolutionaries among them. And in the beginning, in 1920s, it was, they had a very strange and different ideas about the gender equality at that time. For example, they sent to all new so-called republics the women of a propaganda machine. There was, you know, Soviet Union, who knows what does it mean, this horrible regime. They know that was propaganda machine and it was working and working during 70 years. Yeah. And in Georgia, for example, they sent women, they were traveling everywhere in Georgia, in the countryside, in the villages, and asking to women, to Georgian women, to have sexual relation not only with their husbands, but with any men. And they were shocked. There are so many letters written by Georgian women in 20s they sent to Stalin. So, there is a delegation from Moscow here, and they say that it's normal to have a sexual relation not only with the husband, but with everyone. But then they changed it, you know, it happened. Then they changed it, they decided that it's dangerous for the Soviet regime. And I remember from my childhood the propaganda that was working there, that man is a leader, man is a strong, only man. Man is a clever, and so on and so on. So it was working. I remember it. And in the beginning of the 90s, again, when after the Soviet Union was collapsed and after the restoration again, the independence of Georgia, we discovered another Georgia. Suddenly, because of that propaganda, we discovered so strong women, but not so strong men. And in 90s, there was a huge depression in country, in Georgia. And men, I remember, they did not know what to do. They did not find, they could not find jobs. They did not know what to do. They were just drinking and singing, as you know them. But women, suddenly they decide, and they really survived the country. Georgian women by the way, what happened in 20s and 30s in the Soviet times, Stalin exactly knew well that women in Georgia, they were so strong. And that's why there was one special concentration camp in Siberia for Georgian women. They sent from Georgia, not hundreds, but thousands of women to Siberia. Because Stalin, he was, you know, from Georgia. He knew exactly that for regime, women are more dangerous, clever, and strong women than men. And he sent so many, that's why he sent so many women to Siberia. So now what happens? Of course, the situation is better, of course. But I participated in that project with pleasure, HEforSHE. And I traveled everywhere in Georgia. And I was trying to explain, of course I'm writing, generally you mentioned my books about very strong women, because what do we need in Georgia? Examples, very good examples. The examples of strong women. But also it's necessary, as I think, to talk to the women, to be more stronger than they are. Because of Soviet propaganda, for example, we knew and we know there is violence in the family, but they don't talk about. They think that this is the problem of family inside. They don't talk. But step by step, I think that situation will be changed, and it's happening now. And I'm very happy that it's happening because I think they were talking about it yesterday. Your president, for example, he mentioned the function and role of women. The same with the Georgian, because I think that what we are fighting for again, that's freedom, the main target we have in Georgia now, in contemporary Georgia. The same you had in Ukraine and the future of our very small country. I think the president of Lietuva said yesterday that's where it happens that the women are fighting. So she was talking about Ukraine, that the women are fighting, that's time, so they are caring about kids and so on and so. Of course, it happens also in Georgia. In Georgia, if you have not been there, have not been to Georgia, you can check it on a map. It's very small. Can you imagine, very small country to be in war against this fucking Russian Empire for 200 years? Can you imagine? We are so tired. But because of women, I'm absolutely sure, because of women, this country is so strong that till now, so that the part of Georgia is, again occupied by Russian troops, we cannot change the target and we cannot change the main wish and idea to be very contemporary and free country. So our future depends on your future. So thank you very much if you are very strong and if Ukrainian women are so strong. Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Dato. I truly, I could not dream about a better panel. Excellent diplomat, true leader, commander, open-minded, progressive politician, brilliant writer, and now famous celebrity. Thank you very much indeed, Taras, for joining us. I know that you had a good reason to be late. I hope everything is fine with your family. But what I wanted to stress, I went on YouTube watching many of your excellent songs, listening to your albums. You are well-known Ukrainian rock and pop singer.
Ми в Україні як рок і поп співак. Ви випустили дуже багато альбомів, ви написали багато гарних пісень. Але що я оціню, це вашу роботу в якості волонтера. І те, що ви подорожуєте по Україні із вашим туром.
Cities, regional centers, also other countries. So you have a very good perspective, seeing the dynamics in the country, developments. Я хочу вам щиро подякувати.
Would like to thank you, and what I liked the most is one of your statements. That's when you said that global gender equality starts in a small flat. It's very good. I liked it very much. It's very nice. And the best tool to break the stereotype is your own example. Don't keep silence. So thank you very much for this. Welcome, Tarase, and I give you the floor.
So thank you so much. It's so nice to be here together with you and to participate in this discussion and to discuss this very important topic. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for this opportunity to share my point of view. And on this very stage, I would be even more than musician and even better than the artist, I mean the actor. So I will be here as the father and the husband, and not touching the political issues or whatever, so all eternal things of the highest level, what's going on in the country. I'm going to talk about the relationship between two people, and that's a wonderful gender respect and gender equality. This is very important thing. So I can talk endless about the stage, about the people who are coming to visit our concert, about the reactions, etc. But I think it's more interesting to share my personal history and to tell you what's going on in my life, what is the relationship and how I build it with my wife, and what is the basis and what is the basics ideas for the gender equality. What is respect towards the woman in the family and in the world as a whole problem. So, well, together with my beloved one, we are dealing the same business. So, well, I'm the actor and she's an actress. And it's a kind of a bonus for us, and especially for us, it's very understandable. And for me, it's so simple to make everything equal and to accept logically as a natural way, a natural thing, and to understand that none of us are in advantage regarding the rights. And I am dealing about the rights towards the treatments of our kids, or to do something together. So well, we don't need to explain to each other what we're doing, so why we do this or why we do that. So well, we are doing the same thing. And then even the so-called ordinary things, so-called routine stuff, routine work, it's alike. So well, everything alike. So whether you are a woman or a man, so we have the same goal, and we just deal with the same business every day. And that was the first starting step for us, and then we've been together since the time when we met each other. We've been actors and actresses, and well, then we had we got our kids, and then there was God, or that it was what His luck and then His choice to give us our kids. But on the very special moment we started to treat our kids, we got a very specific frame of my life. So I got some, I'd rather say, specific areas to deal with. And I got a lot of things when she was traveling with the troupe of artists, actors. So I was in charge for my house. And then when I was traveling, she was in charge of the house. And everything sticked to the process of growing our kids. And then we came to the conclusion that we can replace each other so well. But I would like to say, when we are together, we add to each other a lot of features and then we came to understanding, even painless. It was painless, and I came to understanding that even in the small flat, you can find the absolutely equal rights, responsibilities, and the different characters, but life is going on. And if we are, for example, together, or if I'm staying at home, or if I have the function to treat my kids, to care of my kids, I know that no one but me, and that's the same to her. And well, also it's very organic tradition for us. Everything in the kitchen everything were transformed into the very special platform for communication. So when we are together at home, we can sit and talk and discuss all the very interesting issues. So we can discuss our plans, and we can discuss all the moments of misunderstanding or whatever. So well, and it's very good tradition. Every evening, even when we have time for it or we have the opportunity, so well, we can talk and discuss. And then this discussion is very important because somehow it's clear what bad of mine, what is not good from her, whatever. So it's a kind of a sample, a good sample of the behavior. And well, 10 years we're already together living with my wife. So well, and this is the absolutely stable tradition. So well, in our family we have the rule of our family. So well, it's a kind of a to use all the type of, humiliation or some other things like that, to say, is completely forbidden. So we shouldn't use any bad words or oppress or humiliate someone, or at least to humiliate one of the parents. And I would like to focus that it's very important to say that this is in the context of the history of Ukraine, the Ukrainian society, because quite often the Ukrainian men, they just, they want to dominate over women, and because of this dominating process, they just, somehow they could use the violence cases. They could beat. And even more, we've been talking about this very topic, and I want to say that stereotypically speaking, or using the stereotypes from one side, we should not behave like that. But from another side, well, they are doing, but we should not humiliate. And then everything starting from the words. And everything started from the very small, invisible details. And that is why we do have in our family the very specific discussion. So, well, yeah, we do have conflict, some misunderstanding, but we're just trying to minimize it, not to involve kids to this process, and not to show this misunderstanding before the eyes of our kids. And we understand, so we have the evening after they went to sleep, there is a table, there is an evening, and there is us to sit and discuss. We can open the wine, red wine, and communicate. And I want to say it works. And what I want to say, and that's also in my thesis, you can find it. I understand quite clearly that me and my wife, we are like the role game, or the model of the role game for the huge amount of people. So well, that's a kind of a sample to be inherited. So well, it's under consciousness or with your consciousness, no matter you like or not, but you will inherit. My wife and me, we understood clearly from the very beginning that if you become a public person, you have to be in trend, you have to be a sample, you have to be a good example to follow, especially if your followers, your auditor, they are of young people mainly. And well, that's a responsibility. When I am dealing with the public interviews, when I'm on stage, I am trying through my words, through my thoughts, just to give this message of the good model of the behavior. And it works to talk to the TV, to talk to the radio, to discuss in the different forums, to talk to your friends, to communicate with any circles of people. But you have to use all of this through yourself. You have to translate it. You have to, I'd rather say, to express this idea to the people. So, well, and it's very tragic when the influencers are finally not so loyal as they pretended to be, for example, etc. In my case, happily, my life is okay. I'm just, absolutely organically agree with all these ideas. And when I have the possibility, I am always talking about this. So, well, and I call you, please talk, because in every situation you can use this type of mechanisms and you can make it better. So, well, if 100,000 people do it, you can see how it works. And then once we can wake up and we can see the absolutely completely changed world, the world can be changed by it. So thank you so much. Ви знаєте, 26 хвилин перед ланчем. І я б хотів...
1 minute at the end to wrap up and reflect on other statements. But what I would like to do now is, you know, men could talk for hours. So it's not really about us to give you a floor. And I would suggest we take 5 questions and then we will choose the writer. So I can recognize the first person, then the second person, third person.
Good morning. My name is Wanda Nowicka. I am coming from Polish Women's Congress. I will be speaking this afternoon, but let me congratulate you, Marcin, on this panel, fantastic panel. And I have a question to whoever would like to respond. It is fantastic to see all these male feminist movements developing in different parts of the world. We also have strong male feminists in Poland. But in the same time, you also observe, at least in some places, revival of macho movements, those men who believe that they can be proud that they are male, they are anti-feminist, anti-women. So I wonder, if in your respective contexts, do you have the experience of that kind, that on top of having feminist men, you have also anti-feminist men? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent question. And don't hesitate to grill this panel. It's really about grilling us. So the gentleman there. Будь ласка, можна мікрофон вам подати? Там.
Thank you. To answer, some of you have probably seen a recent report from Bloomberg about new unofficial set of rules on Wall Street for the Me Too era, where men are afraid to hire women, where they try to avoid them generally, not to be seen alone in the same room, and so on. So what advice can you give to those privileged men who don't understand the problem and who are so afraid of empowered women and of gender equality in general? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The microphone goes there, and then the next question there. Будь ласка.
Thank you for this opportunity. I have a question to the Iceland MP. You told us that your deputies, they used a lot of bad words towards the handicapped, to the so-called vulnerable categories, and we do have some cases like that, so they use bad words. You heard about the scandal when Mr. Vlasenko used very incorrect, humiliated words towards the women deputy, and you told us that it would be a kind of a punishment. What type of punishment? Moral pressure from other MPs, or maybe it would be a kind of a financial punishment, or whatever. So could it be explained? Good afternoon, Cherkasova Kristina. I'm the representatives of the Youth Council of Kharkiv. We have the tendency, we do have the young leaders in this country, and even the teenagers, the youngest, they are watching them, following them, and this is very good samples and the behavioral samples. And I would like to ask your advices, what is the advice for the young leaders, especially for teenagers, for the young generation of our country? What do you think? What is the values we have to promote? What is the best positive samples? How we can be the best for the youngest generation?
What I would like to do is to revert the order, and poczynajmy z tego teraz. Możesz?
Thank you. So, let me say a few. It's a lumbersexual, machos and masculine stuff. You know, you asked a very interesting question, the first one. Yeah, of course, we've had this surroundings. And we had the discussion among that type of people. And, you know, they remind me Robinson's cruise, or they are just, remember Robinson put the signs of how many days he spent there. So, well, the men, they are doing the same, how many women they had in their life. It should be the discussion, and it should be a specific way to prove and to influence for these changes. And it takes time. So, well, we have to change the attitudes from the side of the society. What to do in the democratic society, it's just the trends. We have to form the trends, establish these trends. I would be very satisfied to participate in some of the discussions among the so-called masculine machos. So, well, for example, it would be nice to take a picture, a man staying with the pumper on the shoulder or whatever. So, well, or that's a kind of listen, it's not so bad because I am carrying my baby. This is why I carry these pumpers. So, well, we should be also interesting to make a kind of a virus story. Maybe I should have the bed, and then I have to do something just to use these positive things to change this. Maybe we have to be self-ironic, self-sarcastic, etc. So we have to use a lots of fun to be actively working in the internet. What is the attitude towards that men, those who are humiliated? Women publicly. So, well, it's the way of the personal education. I know that in that case it was the specific excuse. We know that the person gave an excuse to that lady, but it's too complicated. It's a different approaches, different cases. So we have to understand all the parties, and then we have to understand what to do. Thank you.
Very shortly. Sometimes I teach the history of literature at the university, and it's easy to discover that the difference between young women and men in Georgia, for example. I don't know, maybe it happens everywhere in the world, but in Georgia, for sure, women are more clever than men. But yeah, it's true. In Georgia, for sure. So, by the way, yesterday there was here the good example of clever and very beautiful and successful Georgian young woman, Hatia Dekanoidze. But she's not only the one. What happens there, I remember, they are among my students. Always it happens. Then the girls are more clever, smart and so on than boys. But then those smart and clever girls, they disappear. So, and we see in the parliament or in other, the head of institutions, men become the head of and rulers, but not those very clever and smart girls. So, so that's the answer for you. So not disappear, please, because we need your energy, we need your brain and everything you have. It's very necessary for my country, for example, also I think for your country and generally for the society, for the future of this society and of this earth, I think so. What else?
I think that's perfect. Thank you,
Okay,
David.
thank you.
Andreas, there was one specific question. If you could just tell us about what the ethics committee is going to do with those gentlemen.
Yeah, well, that's one of the difficult questions. We don't really know. It's the first time we do this. And elected representatives have no higher authority. We get our mandate from the people. And we don't have any fixed rules about what will happen if the ethics committee decides that these people have done something very wrong. Two of them have stepped aside. They're not in parliament these days. They've taken a leave of absence while the thing is being investigated. But this is really difficult. We don't know what to do, how to do it. I guess I'll just have to come back with an answer in a month or two when we have the result. But some of these people should I think, in the end, resign. But we can't make them. They have to do it on their own. That's just the way our constitution works. Now, Kristina, you were wondering about young people. And the way things are in Iceland is the young people are now leading the campaign, not just in feminism, but in just making the country better. We've had the discussion for many years now that young people aren't engaged in politics, and that's true when it comes to traditional party politics. But in the past few years, young people have been using unconventional methods like social media to push specific issues. So when the Me Too movement appeared, we did that 3 years earlier because of young women, girls, ages 15 to 20, that were specifically raising the issue of gender-based violence and harassment online. And they just, through this social media mobilization, made this an issue. And the same segment of society has been doing the same thing with other issues. So I think I'm too old to give you advice. But I mean, the power you have in the younger generations is just something that you have to harness. You have to realize that you have proper power in the generations that even don't have the right to vote, just these 10 years around the age of 20. So grab that power and get some changes done.
Yeah. And Andres, I think you are too modest. You don't want to mention that a prime minister of your country, Ms. Jakobsdottir, is the youngest woman prime minister in Europe, and she should be also inspiration for you. You know. Thank you very much. So now, if we can move to Commander Martin Broker, you've probably seen many cases which Wanda described of macho culture in the Navy and how you were dealing with those.
Well, Australia is pretty famous for its macho culture, as is our sportsmen and women, and of course it existed within our Defence Force. For all the questions, I have 3 answers. What I was thinking about is, we talked about gender values, masculine, feminine, and family values, but there's one word that describes it that's common amongst those, and actually it's the fact that we all expect respect from everybody else. We demand respect for ourselves, and I think it applies to young people as well, is that you seek out respect and you demand respect. And the second point, I guess, is that in Australia we have an expression, maybe you have it here, is the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. So we actually have to call out the standards, like you've done in Iceland, and call out people. You need to call out the fact that somebody who professed to be he for she is now actually doing something which is completely against that. And I think the last point I would say is that I sit here on this stage, but actually I need to act big. I need to act big. You see, you think about watching television or a movie on the screen, the director helps you see what needs to be seen. But on the stage and in everyday life, you actually have to be big. You actually have to stand up and say what is important here. Thank you.
Panie Sergeju, number of very important international documents, UN Resolution 1325, Istanbul Convention. Not many people know that this is your hard work which actually pushed Ukraine towards compliance with those very important international standards. But we've also heard about the reforms which you are planning with the ministry. Can you see in the room any future diplomats?
Right, thank you. I was in my office this morning, and then before I left for this conference, I grabbed whatever I had on my table, and those are Constitutional Ukraine in English, Constitutional Ukraine in Ukrainian. I have no idea why it's with me here. It's Rules of Procedures of the General Assembly of the United Nations. It's Istanbul Convention, and this is another thing I will talk about later on. And in reply to Vanda's Novitska question, what happens if there is a political change of political environment, what to do with that, with the rise of right wings, left wings, whatever. As a lawyer by trade, I would say certainly that we have to base our actions on legal standards, on laws that are not subject to the volatility of political climate. But then I would take, in our case, the constitution of Ukraine, and I would open, for example, an Article 24, and that is an article in the chapter about the human rights and citizens' rights, and Article 24. 80% of the text of the article is about the women's rights. Women's rights. I mean, equality of the rights of women and men is ensured by providing women, ensuring women, letting women, motherhood women, 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 women. And what happens then? Nothing done. So on the one hand, as a lawyer by trade and by education, I would say, let's enforce our legal standards, but on the other hand, we have the Constitution, which is the highest law in any nation, and it's not enforced. Therefore, the Council of Europe and many other institutions do speak about the bridging gap between de jure and de facto. And then I would like to say two things, and I very much like what Taras said about violence and about his conversations with his partner, with his wife. Violence in today's Europe is not defined as a physical violence only. And violence in the family does not necessarily start with the physical violence. Violence in today's family, in most of the cases, starts with the psychological violence, with financial violence, and maybe later on it comes to the physical violence. Therefore, I'm very much surprised to say, to observe how the Russians in the international fora, including in the OEC, by the way, in Warsaw, in the Human Dimension annual meeting, when one Russian said, we are horrified with the figures of violence in the UK. 7 million of acts of violence registered. And then I had to take the floor and say, look, in Russia, violence is only by law a physical violence, while in the UK, violence is emotional, psychological, financial, and another fundamental difference, that in the UK, violence is more oftenly registered with police, and not registered in Russia, and not registered in Ukraine. Therefore, to conclude, I would highly advertise what the Council of Europe does, and the Council of Europe does, guaranteeing equal access of women to justice. So it's not enough to have it in the books of law. It's not enough to have it in the Constitution. It's not enough even to have it in your family, Taras, but it's also important to guarantee in practice the equal access to justice. And women without money in today's world has no access to justice, whether we like it or not, and we have to work on it. And I look at our parliamentarians, I'm sure the parliamentarians would do everything we need to ensure that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to echo what Mr. Sergei just mentioned, we do not realize that violence against women, especially psychological violence, is the #1 cause of death of women in Europe. More women die as a result of violence, including domestic violence, that they die in car accidents or as a result of cancer. And this is the topic which cannot be ignored. That's a very, very important contribution. We still have 7 minutes, so I'm going to take another round of questions. I can see Maria.
Yeah.
And then colleague there, Maria.
Maria, будь ласка.
Can I do it here?
I don't want, for me it's more important, more political issue, and I would like to ask our Georgian colleague and guest as acting chair of the Committee on European Integration. We often compare Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine now as because of association agreement and because of Russia aggression. And for me, telling the truth, I know that your new president has announced when in 2008 was Russia aggression in Georgia, that Georgia has attacked Russia. And as you were telling us about your strong women, and now it's a political leadership, what do you think, do you see the risk and the challenge as we also afraid of, revenge of such soft power, traditional family and all empire values. And don't you see here a challenge for you, a threat for your country that it will be back? Because for us, it's also still a challenge as we see also what is going on in Moldova, what is going on in Georgia. I was an observer in parliamentary election in 2016, and telling the truth, I also saw how society has been started to forget about who has started this aggression. And it's anyway, political leadership, they will provide their statements, but they do not have any punishment and responsibility after such statements. So it's just strategically, if we will think, do you think that you can resist and you can stop such policy?
Thank you very much for this question, but there were so many questions together, but it's okay. So first of all, about the phrase or sentence she said, the new president of Georgia. It happened before. She said, it was not very clearly what did she say. I think she's exception. So generally what happens in Georgia, I understand what do women say, but sometimes don't understand what do men say. But in this case, she said something very strange sentence. And then when they asked her again, she said, I said that no Georgia attacked, but Saakashvili himself. So she wanted to say that it was the Saakashvili at that time was the president of Georgia, and that he attacked. No, of course that's not true, because where it happened, it's very easy. She was born in France, and she became a citizen of Georgia just 3 or 4 months ago to be a president. So I think that she does not know Georgia and its history well, because really Georgia was attacked, of course, not 2008 as you mentioned, but it was beginning of 19th century when Georgia was attacked by Russia. It's in the beginning of 19th century, so 200 years more than 200 years we are in this war. So what will happen in future? I think there is only one solution. Shortly, to build another alternative state. So if Georgia will be, in our case, I'm absolutely sure, if Georgia will be contemporary, very modern, really democratic and independent country, so with the really European institutions and so on, with the really gender equality and so on. So what do we need now? Only this case is solution to win in this horrible war against the Russian empire. We see it's not easy, of course. It's not easy. But what can we do? So this is it's not our choice. So we didn't attack. Well, you know what happened in 19th century when they arrested Imam Shamil, was the leader of Northern Caucasian movement against Russian empire. You know what happened? They arrested him. It was the war between Russia and the Caucasian small nations, about 30 years. And at least they arrested him. And they arrested him and they sent from Chechnya, Dagestan. It is the Dagestan. They sent him to Moscow, so St. Petersburg, that time the capital was in. And every day he was traveling. There was no direct flights from Makhachkala to Moscow. And every day he was asking where I am now. Every day he was asking what country it is. And every day he had the same the answer, the response from Russians. This is Russia. Every day, 4 months, during 4, maybe more. Every day he was asking where I am now. And Russia. He was shocked. He was sure that Russia attacked Caucasia, his motherland, because Russia was a very small country. And they needed more and more lands. And that's why Dagestan and other Caucasian countries, they were attacked by Russia. And he discovered that this is a huge country. Why did they need more and more? Really, we don't know. We don't have an answer. What does Putin need? But it's true what's happening in Georgia or in Ukraine. You can see it. It's real life. So
Dato, if I can, yes. Never ask famous Georgian writer about history if you have 1 minute, please. I mean, Gabriela, the last question.
Sorry.
My Okay, my name is Gabrielle Bardal. I am the gender advisor with HEforSHE, the International Foundation for Electoral Systems. I am based in Washington, D.C., but our programs here in the Ukraine as well as worldwide work to support men in becoming better allies, to support women, particularly in political leadership. Gender awareness is a journey, both for men and for women. It's a journey that takes place over the course of a full lifetime. So my questions to you are very practical. The first is, what strategies would you recommend for identifying those men who are ready to set forth on that journey so that we can all work to empower them in that process? And also, and it's been some mentioned earlier, but this journey often involves certain breakthrough points, certain moments in our personal lives and our professional lives that make us wake up to this issue. And my question is also, what are those breakthroughs that you would identify and encourage us to work with? Thank you.
Excellent final question. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give the floor to each of the speakers for 1 minute. Please do answer this question, and also think there are millions of Ukrainian men watching you online right now. So what are the 2-3 key points you would like them to remember from this panel? We'll start with Deputy Minister.
All right. Well, I think that the better the life of the women in Ukraine, the better the life of the men in Ukraine, you know, and we have to learn it. My breakthrough point was when I became a single parent. I have a wonderful son. My son has a wonderful mother. But my son lives with me. I have a son who is 19 years old. 18 years of his life he lived with me. And believe me, I had a very hard time being a single dad in all-female environment in the school, in the social services, where I couldn't really break the wall of female solidarity, trying to assert my role as a father. And nevertheless, despite the wall, I realized that in order to break that wall, I have to make those women successful, and not only as teachers, not only as social workers, not only as low-paid personnel, but very successful politicians and businesswomen. And therefore, I'm fighting for the high-profile role of Ukrainian women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commander?
I think in terms of identifying men, that it's somebody who actually has a need to change. We have an expression in Australia which is, if it interests my boss, it fascinates me. And I guess if you apply that to men in particular roles, whether they be in management roles or political roles, it's about explaining to them the value of this and what it means to the constituents and what the value of that is. I think in terms of how you take that message to them, it needs to be constant, because sometimes you don't get it the first time. You need to be continually reinforced. I think the breakthrough moment is often when you have somebody that you care about, or somebody that you know in your organisation that gives you the facts, the hard, cold truth of what that impact has been. Then you get that breakthrough moment, because then they get it. And you need to continue to do that.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Andres?
Yeah, I think the Minister touched upon one of the key points, a better society for women. All of the advances that the feminist movement has made to society, they benefit all of us. Because being allowed by society to be a father taking part in raising your children is something that really does something just for your heart. And that's something that I think men eventually come to understand. I think it's also good to take this systemic problem down to the relationship between two people, because many of the things we're faced with are just between two people, violence and harassment. We need to know our boundaries, need to know how to behave, basically. But as allies of the movement, we mainly need to learn how to listen. It may sound a bit ironic after sitting here for an hour and a half talking, but we need to listen to the women that feel threatened in the workplace when they're alone with a man in a conference room, rather than listening to the men that feel threatened hiring women that feel threatened by them. We need to listen to the young women or just children that are faced with sexual harassment from the first moment they go online. They get unwanted advances from old men. We need to listen and we need to react to what needs to be done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Дякую. Дякую. Ви знаєте, якщо у нас є одна війна і один ворог, то у нас одні ті самі проблеми. І я напишу це в своїй майбутній книжці про ці стосунки і що це буде. І ви знаєте, жінка, якщо ми вчора про неї говорили, і Лариса Косач, пам'ятаєте, ми про неї говорили? Леся Українка, звісно. Вона дуже така сильна людина, і вона в 19-му році в сторіччі починала о незалежності і свободі починала говорити. І вона говорила про українську свободу. Да, так, 19 сторіччя. І, ви знаєте, це повинно повторювати її ідеї. І, ви знаєте, вона жила в Грузії, вона померла там. І вона, знаєте, і вона сказала, якщо я не була українкою, я б хотіла б стати грузинкою. І це, ви знаєте, література, вона дійсно вражає, вона впливає, і мені просто краще написати книжку для того, щоб зробити так, щоб це працювало. А Леся Українка – це чудовий приклад. Я вибачаюсь, якщо у мене є час, я б ще сказав, так, Саакашвілі зрозуміло, що він не зміг би почати війну і так далі. Ну, я знаю, що новий президент Грузії що сказав. Може, це була така, як шутка, ну, а це, скажімо так, не кращий гумор, який взагалі можна брати на уваги. І я написав книгу, і там дуже багато і презентацій, і ідей, і так далі. Але в Києві, знаєте, 3 роки тому, пам'ятаєте, був чемпіонат, і я говорив про свою книжку і літературу, і я спитав у аудиторії, що, якщо є якісь питання. О, знаєте, я люблю тих, хто пише, тому що вони можуть безкінечно говорити. I would be very brief. How to find the good understanding to how to analyze, to talk, to check, to go through these specific trials, but you have to be absolutely strong in understanding that you have to do it few times and not only one time, and not be scared to look for something interesting, something better changes. And next, in this journey, we should find the best things in your crisis moments. So you have to find the best solution. So I already reminded about the red wine, which is the wonderful idea. So at least you can provide the choice to your wife. Tell her to choose the wine. And the second, let's talk. That's it.
And rotate.
Дуже дякую.
Works.
Okay. It is a journey, as my feminist sister is saying, if I want to go fast, I will go alone. But if I want to get further and really far, we will go together. And I think this panel showed you that we need to go together. This is going to be a long journey. I would like to thank all of you for active participation, our speakers. Щиро дякую. And well-deserved lunch. Thank you.
Дякуємо, Marcin. Thank you, dear speakers. Welcome you to take a photo together on the stage. Шановні гості, оголошується перерва на обід до 14-ї години. Дуже просимо пристрої синхронного перекладу залишити на кріслах. Будь ласка, пристрої синхронного перекладу залиште на кріслах. Шановні